Hello, hai cả nhà. Hôm nay thì Cindy được hân hạnh giới thiệu với cả nhà mình một chỗ này nổi tiếng ở tiểu bang New Hampshire. Đây là một cái điểm được du lịch lên núi bằng xe lửa, và hy vọng rằng khi coi được cái clip này mọi người lại càng thích thú thêm cái nước Mỹ, vì nó quá đẹp, quá hùng vĩ và có rất là nhiều điều để cho mình khám phá. Và sở dĩ Cindy quay để cho cả nhà mình thấy được cái cảnh đẹp ở cái tiểu bang này, một cái danh lam thắng cảnh nổi tiếng, và hiếm khi mà ngay cả bản thân của Cindy được trải nghiệm ở đây. Thì bây giờ cả nhà cùng đồng hành theo dõi với Cindy nha. Đây, Cindy đã tới ở trên một cái vùng núi nha cả nhà. Đây là núi. Cindy khẳng định lên mọi người là Cindy đã vừa lên núi và bây giờ đã đi tới cái chỗ này. Chút xíu nữa thì Cindy mua vé. Và đây là một trong những nơi rất là lạnh nha cả nhà. Cho nên con của Cindy dặn Cindy là phải bận áo lạnh khi mà leo núi. Chút xíu thì Cindy sẽ mua vé. Ở đây có nhiều người tới du lịch lắm. Dân ở đây cũng có, mà dân du lịch ở các tiểu bang khác tới cũng có. Mọi người thấy vẻ đẹp mùa thu của những cái tiểu bang lạnh hết sảy không? Ngày mai thì Cindy sẽ tới một cái tiểu bang, nếu ở thêm 2 tuần nữa sẽ thấy tất cả những cái lá biến thành màu cam và màu vàng hết, không còn màu xanh nữa. Đó, đây là cái chỗ bán vé để mà chút xíu nữa Cindy đi xe lửa này cả nhà. Đó, thì hy vọng rằng khi mà Cindy ngồi xe lửa tham quan, Cindy sẽ quay lại cho cả nhà mình xem nhiều hơn. Còn bây giờ Cindy quay cho cả nhà mình thấy là dân du lịch họ đang ngồi chờ cái chuyến đi này nha. Trong đó có gia đình của Cindy. Đó, xe lửa nó sẽ leo dốc như vậy đó mọi người, và nó đi là thẳng lên trên núi luôn. Con gái Cindy đang mua vé. Mọi người đang xếp hàng ở đây. Trong này là nhà hàng nha mọi người. Đó. Đây là xe lửa, nó sẽ đưa du khách đi nè. Vì cái điều kiện cái battery của cái phone của Cindy nó cũng có giới hạn, cho nên Cindy có quay một số đoạn đường ở trên đỉnh núi. Khi mà quay cái cảnh đẹp ở trên núi, Cindy không nghĩ là Cindy đang lên một cái núi tuyết. White Mountain của cái tiểu bang New Hampshire này nha mọi người. Nếu như không có đụng bản quyền thì Cindy sẽ post cái đường đi lên trên cái đỉnh núi này, đi xe lửa cho cả nhà mình xem. Và bây giờ thì Cindy sẽ cố gắng quay những cái phút phim đẹp nhất để gửi đến cả nhà trong cái chuyến đi lên núi này của Cindy nha. Gái Cindy vô mua vé ở đây nè. Biết xin mua xong chưa? Hi ma'am. Ở đây có bảo tàng luôn. Thật sự là Cindy rất là exciting nha mọi người. Rất là phấn khởi khi mà tới đây luôn. Không thể tưởng tượng trên một cái đỉnh núi mà người ta build nó như thế này, mà nó đẹp như thế này. Bây giờ mới 1:30 thôi mọi người. 3 giờ thì cái xe lửa, cái chuyến của Cindy mua vé nó mới đi. Thì Cindy sẽ đi vòng quanh ở đây. Đây là cái bảo tàng museum. Nó giới thiệu về cái tàu hỏa này nè cả nhà. Ở vùng này thì cái công mâu là nhiều lắm mọi người. Đây là những hình ảnh thời mới phục hưng cái chỗ này. Cho bán quà lưu niệm cả nhà. Restaurant. Đó, bây giờ người ta cho cái người đi lên trước rồi chút xíu nữa rồi mới tới cái chuyến tàu của Cindy. Gift shop nha. Vô coi gift shop cái gì. So cute. Đây nó gọi là cot rail quay nha cả nhà. Đó. Mấy cái áo lưu niệm của nó nè. Ai tới đây người ta đi, người ta cũng mua về để làm quà. Chắc Cindy mua một con làm kỷ niệm. Ở đây nổi tiếng lắm á cả nhà. Ở đây cũng có gấu nữa. So cute. Xin chị mua con này nè. Cindy mới mua hai cái con để làm quà lưu niệm, là cái con khô, cái con giống như linh dương sừng to đó cả nhà, về làm kỷ niệm. Rồi bây giờ Cindy đi lên lại. Đó, chút xíu Cindy đi trên đó đó mọi người. Ok, bây giờ Cindy sẽ stop cái clip ở đây, và khi nào đi lên trên núi với xe lửa thì Cindy sẽ quay tiếp cho cả nhà mình xem, cả nhà mình cùng đón xem nha. Rồi bây giờ chuẩn bị lên xe lửa nha cả nhà ơi. Nó có một cái đường trail cho người ta đi bộ nữa, mà xin định tự hỏi làm sao đi nổi, đúng không? No, hoặc là chạy xe đó cả nhà, cao lắm á. Ok, giờ mình vô xếp hàng nha cả nhà. Mình là hàng A, xếp hàng để vô. Đây là cái máy nè. $90 một người nha cả nhà. Please stand behind the white line. Đứng sau cái vạch màu trắng. Cái tàu của cái tiếng trước nó đi về nó trở lại cả nhà.
Now you're going to be here by the time, right? You're going to sit with mommy and daddy all the way up. Nana's tomorrow.
Oh, what's your friend say? Is she cute?
Very slow. Slow, 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 slow. 2-3 chuyến rồi, đâu phải 1 chuyến đâu.
Stay still, dude. Oh, and look, there's another one coming down the mountain.
Dân tình có vẻ thú vị cái tàu lửa.
What you say, Noah? See, he'll probably blow his horn. Gotta be watching. Gotta watch.
Thêm 1 chuyến nữa cả nhà. Cả nhà có thấy ngạc nhiên khi mà tàu hỏa nó leo dốc được không? Nó phải có một cái hệ thống ở giữa cái đầu mái để nó kéo được cái toa tàu leo núi đó cả nhà. Cho nên đây là một trong những cái di tích nổi tiếng của tiểu bang này nữa. Hành khách get live rồi và hành khách trên tàu hỏa cũng xuống rồi cả nhà. Thấy ai cũng có vẻ vui mà mệt mỏi nha. Bây giờ lên tàu cả nhà ơi. Vé của mình C5.
Anything else today? Have a great trip. Okay.
Full people. Rồi tàu khởi hành. Full.
Okay, welcome aboard, everybody, and welcome to the world's first mountain climbing railway. My name is Tom. I'm your brakeman for the ride up. Our engineer Steve. We're both pleased to have you on our train. I'm going to quickly run through some safety things with you since we're running a little behind schedule here. And the first thing is if you wouldn't mind staying at your seats here at the very beginning. Very shortly I'll give you the go all the way down because the downward momentum of the train makes it unsafe to stand in the aisle with the steep grade. So if you do want to check things out from somewhere other than where you're seated, make sure you do it on the up mountain trip. If you are up and around, please do not touch anything at the bottom end of the train, because what's back there all has to do mainly with braking. It's all set the way it needs to be. So I'm 100% certain that you would agree with me it's better not to touch anything back there. But those are brakes, those big black wheels you see back there. On the down mountain trip, the brakeman is down there at that end of the coach, standing by at those brakes. But going up the mountain, I'm going to be up front here on the platform, because my main duty is to watch the tracks going up the mountain, since their engineer is way back there and can't see the tracks ahead of us. So that's what I'll be doing. It means I'll mainly be talking to you with my back to you, unfortunately, but of course safety comes first. So you may be wondering, I told you that I'm the brakeman and all the brakes are down there, but I'm going to be up here. It might make you sweat a little bit. But the answer is there's another brake system back there called a sprag. And what that does simply, raise your hands and say aye. All right, anyone opposed? Wish to abstain? Well, Except it won't have the same ending. Remember, we're on a grade. If you put your personal belongings down at your feet and forget about them, you'll probably have to chase them down to the bottom end of the train, so keep that in mind. All right. So, I usually start with this whole thing about the weather on Mount Washington. But suffice it to say that if you ever hear anybody say this is the home of the world's worst weather, you're not too far off the mark. It is surprising. The weather at the summit of this mountain is surprisingly harsh. It can do anything at any time of the year. It can snow in the middle of the summer. The winds tend to blow very heavy. You have found a day where it is beautiful up there. And it is actually warmer than they were forecasting.
Very beautiful.
At least it feels that way. I think the winds are lighter than they said we were going to have. So last hour when I was up there, it was very pleasant, and the views are outstanding. But you should know that if you ever come here on foot to climb this mountain, be prepared for winter, even in the summer. It does snow in the middle of the summer above the trees, so you need to know about that. Some people don't know about that and get in trouble. And we have a lot of search and rescues on this mountain. 180 to 200 of them a year. So not a place to take lightly if you're on foot. And this is exactly the scenario under which this railway was built in the first place. And I'll tell you that story in just a little bit here. You heard the horn, and that means that we've reached our top cruising speed. Just like that. 0 to 5 miles an hour in 2 minutes. And that is going to get us to the summit in about 40 to 45 minutes. So now that we're cruising along, you are welcome to get up and move around the train. At the base, we were at 2,700 feet. The summit is at 6,288 feet above sea level. It makes Mount Washington the tallest mountain in the northeastern United States. So with that difference, it's about a 3,600-foot elevation gain on our 3-mile trip to the summit. What that means is that the average grade on the length of the railway is 25%. Every 100 feet of forward progress we make, we're gaining 25 feet of elevation, 1 in 4. That's a very steep grade for a railway. Conventional trains don't climb much more than a 4% grade. We're doing 25. How do we do that? Rack and pinion. You see this third rail running up the middle of the tracks here. This is called the rack, and it's made up of 2 parallel steel L-bars connected by solid steel spools. The whole thing looks a bit like a bicycle chain. And underneath the locomotive there are 4 heavy-duty steel gears called cogs. And they look kind of like the logos you see on the end of your benches there. And they look a bit like bicycle sprockets. So if you think of this system as analogous to a bike sprocket on its chain, although the chain is fixed, as the locomotive drives the cogs, the teeth engage between the spools on the rack and pull us up the mountain. It's pretty much as simple as that. That accounts for all of the drive and all of the braking. So the wheels on the rails are doing nothing other than keeping us stable. They're freewheeling. Everything happens through the rack and the cog. And this is the same system that's been used on the railway since it was built and opened up just over 150 years ago. We opened in 1869. And this whole thing was the genius of a man named Sylvester Marsh, a New Hampshire native, born in 1803 and raised in the small white mountain town of Campton, just a little south of here. In fact, most of you came through Campton on your way here. It's on Interstate 93. And like many in his generation, he headed westward seeking his fortune, and he found it not long after arriving in 1833 in the very small Midwestern town of Chicago, Illinois, population of about 300 at the time. And Sylvester Marsh was an innovative guy. He held several patents, and he got wealthy off of some of his inventions, including something called a grain dryer. which revolutionized agriculture at the time, allowing shippers to store their grain without rotting as it awaited shipment down the Great Lakes and through the Erie Canal. And so Sylvester Marsh became one of the wealthiest men in the country and decided to retire early. And in the 1850s returned here to his native New England and settled back down in Boston. At the time he was suffering from something that in those days they called dyspepsia, and his doctor told him that the best remedy would be lots of fresh air. So he made a trip back up here to the White Mountains, visiting family in Campton. And one day in August of 1857, he climbed Mount Washington. Now, the problem was that Sylvester Marsh knew nothing about the weather on this mountain, and so he was completely unprepared when he left the base on a perfectly good August afternoon. But when he got above the trees, above 5,000 feet, he was in for something completely different. The weather turned against him suddenly and dramatically, and he nearly succumbed to hypothermia. But he got very lucky, because at the time there were a couple of buildings on the summit that had recently been built, including the Tip Top House, built in 1853, and the Tip Top House is still up there today. You'll see it when you get off the train. And so he was able to stagger into the Tip Top House, get to the summit, stagger into the Tip Top House, gain shelter, and thereby save his life. And he spent the night there. When he woke up the next morning, everything had changed completely. Deep blue skies and tremendous views in all directions. He could see to the east out to the Atlantic Ocean, to the north up to Canada, and to the west across northern Vermont to the Adirondack Mountains of upstate New York. So he made a vow to himself right then and there to figure out a better way to get more people up this mountain to enjoy its beauty without risking their lives the way he had the day before. And eventually we came up with this rapid canyon railway idea. But at the time nobody thought he could do it, and he needed to get a charter to be permitted to build a railway on the mountain, and that required an act of the state legislature. So in 1858 he headed down to Concord, and there he encountered more than a few skeptical legislators. In the 1850s, people simply had a hard time believing that a train could climb a mountain. They had never seen it to make a single trip to the summit. But their little tenders only hold about 700 gallons, so each steam train has to stop right here on the way up the mountain to top off their tender in order to complete the trip. They use that big black hose there to do that work. And of course they heat up all that water to steam by burning coal, and it takes 1 ton of coal to make a single trip to the summit. So a ton of coal and 1,000 gallons of water for the steamers. The biodiesels burn between 16 and 20 gallons of biodiesel fuel on a single run. Warbeck Station here to our left, so-called, fairly new. We built it last fall. Serves primarily as our off-season destination between mid-October and mid-April, when the weather at the summit is far too harsh to be dropping people off up there, particularly since the state park up there is closed. The summit is a state park. They run the Sturman Adams Visitor Center. The building will be dropping it off at today, which has restrooms, snack bar, gift shop. But that building is closed between October and April, so we're not so cool as to drop people off there without any shelter. So for a reduced fare, they can come this far, still get the train experience, and on a decent day like today, they can see the nice views to the west. And the berries generally come out around Labor Day. They were right on schedule this year. Right here to the right, there's a gap in the trees. This is going to give us a wonderful view here to the south, across the Ammonoosuc Ravine, which drains the west side of Mount Washington, the summit of Mount Washington up ahead to the right. But take a look over there, and you see that little building on the ridge. You can also see a river winding down the mountain directly below that building. That's the Ammonoosuc River, which is the same river that flows under the trestle at the base station that we just crossed down there. Now, that building is a hiker's hut that can only be reached on foot. It's called the Lakes of the Clouds hut because right beside it there are 2 small lakes.